Buenas tardes, good afternoon from Madrid. Good morning, Professor Eric Mazur. Thank you so much for being with us virtually. We are very lucky to have you on board. An event that we have planned to celebrate within the framework of the Breakfast of Innova Forum with the sponsor of ACISA, one of the most important supporters of our university. Let me first, for this reason, to thank his president, Francisco Iborra, for his contribution in this innovative initiative. Thank you very much, Francisco. We have managed to be together in one of the most exciting and perhaps far-reaching transformation as far as higher education is concerned. We hope that next time, Eric, you will have the opportunity to meet in person in Madrid, because although during the last 80 days, we have completely replaced our face-to-face traditional model in favor of online work, it will always be a pleasure to enjoy the presence of Professor Mazur and taking a tour with him around our campus. My most sincere gratitude as well to those who are with us today. Some of them have been able to attend your lecture through the YAP courses, including our regional Minister of University, Science and Innovation of the Community of Madrid. Good afternoon, Eduardo. Thank you very much for being with us, for your unwavering support in these matters. This is especially so at this time where we are endeavoring to build up the virtual teaching and evaluation model of the University of Madrid. Eric Mazur is the Balkansky Professor of Physics and Applied Physics and Area Chair of Applied Physics at Harvard University, member of the Faculty of Education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and past president of the Optical Society. Professor Mazur is a prominent physicist known for his contribution in nanophotonics, an international recognized educational innovator, and a sought-after speaker. In education, he is widely known for his work on peer instruction and interactive teaching methods aimed at engaging students in the classroom and beyond. In 2014, Mazur became the inaugural recipient of the Minerva Prize for Advancement in Higher Education. He has received many awards for his work in physics and in education, and has founded several successful companies. Professor Mazur has widely published in peer-reviewed journals and holds numerous patents. He has also written extensively on education and is the author of Peer Instruction, a user manual published in 1997, a book that explains how to teach lecture classes interactively, and of the principle and practice of physics, published in 2015, a book that presents a groundbreaking new approach to teaching introductory calculus-based physics. Professor Mazur is a leading speaker on optics and on education. His motivational lecture on interactive teaching, educational technology, and assessment have inspired people around the world to change their approach to teaching. This is only a very brief presentation of the peer instruction professor that is going to share with us the way of getting every student ready for every class, a very inspired title. Let me now present and thank Sorin Kostri, Vice-Rector of University Network and Public Relations of Bucharest University, and Steering Committee member of Civis University. Thank you very much, Sorin, for accepting to be moderator of our conference supported by Civis, our European civic university formed by the alliance of 8 leading research higher education institutions across Europe, with a strong civic identity. A global initiative with strong roots to local territories, regions, and communities, turning toward the Mediterranean and African regions and nurturing a new Ambition European higher education initiative. Civis members are committed to work together in order to address the 21st century challenges. We are an impact-driven alliance that fosters genuine innovation and social transformation. We are so proud to share with all of our members your conference. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, Sorin. Thank you very much to everybody.
Hello, everybody. I think now we will have few words, right, from Mr. Eduardo Sicilia, Regional Minister of Science, Universities and Innovation, Comunidad de Madrid.
Good afternoon, Madrid. Good morning in Boston. And many thanks to Autónoma University and especially to its rector, Professor Rafael Garese. It's a great privilege to be part of this exciting event and to be able to share this virtual space with the universities of tomorrow. The CIVIS Alliance is driving innovation and excellence, and the Autónoma University is part of this revolution. And special thanks to the Academy for this effort to safeguard university life despite COVID. This season of the International Academic Program is a perfect example of your commitment to students and to society. We are not the same people that we were 4 months ago. Neither the society, institution, or companies are. We have all learned a lot during these uncertain times. At the beginning of the lockdown, universities managed to adapt all their programs from traditional in-person teaching to remote classes in just 48 hours. This process requires an immense effort from both professors and students. Even harder was to define fair evaluation model where the students' learning progress was collected. We now have the opportunity and challenge to reconsider our own university education model. We will be able to define what content is suitable to digital environments or masterclass and which dynamics can only be done face-to-face, where the key always lays on the interaction between students and on the source of the collective intelligence. Professors must extract knowledge, not impart knowledge. Some time ago, I had the honor of attending Professor Mazur classes at Harvard, and I know he always says that learning must be a social experience for reaching in a virtual setting. I understood early on that technology is but an instrument for reaching more people in a more effective way. He knew that he would need further engagement and interactive strategies in an online education. And I believe that we need to pursue a new model with a new interaction dynamics between professor and students. The pandemic has precipitated a learning revolution that should have taken place years ago. And Madrid is committed to lead this way toward these changes. The government of Madrid is determined to work on a legal framework to promote growth and innovation via the creation of the learning society. The university must be a role model to society. It must lead the transformation that we need. Having knowledge is not enough. The university needs to innovate in what it does and how it does it. If we take this big step towards transformation university, we will transform society. Let's take on the challenge, not because of coronavirus, but because we have a great opportunity to do it now. The crisis has taught us what we are able to achieve through our will, culture, strategy, and responsibility. I am certain that university, what welcomes us today, we will lead in this process. I look forward to listening Professor Mazur, who will inspire us. Thanks, many thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Eduardo Sicilia. Thank you, Rector Rafael Garese, for your very kind words. And now, hello again, everybody. Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. And now it's my honor and pleasure to introduce you Professor Eric Mazur, who is well known around the world for both physics and the metaphysics of teaching by questioning. So, Eric, you have the floor in order to let us know how to get every student ready for every class. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rector Garese and Councillor Cecilia and Vice Rector Coste. It's great to have this opportunity to speak to you. Not in the way that we had intended. the original plan was to have me come to you in Madrid, and I was very much looking forward to my trip. Who could have predicted just a few months ago how much the world has changed? Councillor Cecilia said something really interesting. He said that learning deep down is a social experience, and here we are, all isolated, socially isolated, cut off from each other, only connecting electronically online. And I think I'd like to get back to that that idea in a moment as we go through this event here. I want to start by reflecting for a moment on when I started teaching at Harvard. Feels like yesterday. It's already 36 years ago. I cannot believe how time flies. When I started teaching, I never asked myself, how am I going to teach? Which is, kind of strange, right? Because when you start to do something new in your life, that should be the first question you ask yourself. Question did not even come up in my mind. It was perfectly clear what I was going to do in my classroom. I was going to do to my students what my professors had done to me, to lecture, as you can see on this very old picture of me teaching in the screen in front of you or just below there. Now, why did I do that? I did that because, in a sense, I was projecting my own experiences onto the world around us. I think we all tend to do that, right? When I was a student, I had learned physics from my professors by sitting in a classroom like that, an auditorium, listening to them lecture. And I'm sure that when they started lecturing, they made exactly the same assumption. They had learned it in an auditorium from their professors, and therefore they started lecturing when they became a professor. And so forth, generation after generation after generation after generation, all the way to this person here. This is actually an illustration from an illuminated manuscript from the 14th century, showing a king of Germany, emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, giving a guest lecture at the University of Bologna. And look at the similarity between this illustration, this was an event that probably took place in the 11th or 12th century, and a picture of me lecturing early in my career. It's not very different. You can see here how people in the front row are carefully paying attention and looking at the lecturer or at their notes. The people in the second row look a little bit less engaged. You can see a picture here of two people who are looking rather bored. And in the back row, they're not even paying attention. They're chatting with each other. And then there's this person here in the front row. I don't know if he or she is just cringing in agony or fell asleep. It shows a scene that is very familiar to all of us in higher education. And it also shows how little education has evolved over the course of hundreds of years. Back to the 20th century when I started teaching. And you can see that this is a really, really, really old picture. It was taken BC. No, not before Christ. I'm not that old. It was taken before computers. You can see I'm using an overhead projector there. Now, something really interesting happened. As I told you, I started lecturing this way. I was asked to teach as an assistant professor a course that nobody in my department wanted to teach, physics for pre-medical students. These were not students who wanted to learn physics. No, they already hated physics before getting into my classroom. So they thought, since these students who don't like taking physics give poor evaluations to us, let's ask the new assistant professor to teach that course. And something really interesting happened. What happened was that the students actually liked my lectures. They gave me really high evaluations. Most of my colleagues would get low evaluations for the physics for pre-medical student course. I got high evaluations. And on top of that, they did well on what I thought were difficult exams. So very quickly, I started to believe that I was the world's best physics teacher. It turned out that it was not quite a realistic idea, but it was very pleasant. And for many, many years, I went on lecturing like this, thinking that I was more successful as a teacher than most of my colleagues at Harvard University. Now, it turned out that this was a complete illusion, a house of cards, which later I found out was not true at all. Yes, my students liked my lecture, and yes, they could do well on my exams. But if I asked them very simple conceptual questions that asked them to transfer what they'd learned from the situation which they'd learned into a situation they had not seen before, they were unable to answer the question. So rather than giving you all the detail, which you can see in my lectures on YouTube, I thought I was going to do with you a little demo. I want to do you a little demo. I'm going to give you a little lecture just to show you how ineffective the lecture is, and also to show you something that suggests a much better approach to teaching. Now, my little lecture will be very short, and it will be aimed at a general audience like you. It will be dealing with thermal expansion. Thermal expansion deals with the fact that hard solids like stone or metal or wood expand when they get hotter, and they contract again when they get colder. This is very important in engineering, in medicine, in many different areas. And you may think, well, it doesn't affect me. Yes, it affects you as well. If you've ever been in a train at low speed as it approaches the station, you may have heard this clickety-clack sound of the wheels as the train goes from one section of the rail to another. The reason that you hear this clickety-clack sound is that the sections of the rails are not touching each other. There's a little gap that is left in between them. And when the wheel goes over that gap, it makes this clickety-clack sound. The reason they put the rails down with a little opening is so that when it gets hotter and the metal expands, there's space for that expansion to take place. If you just put the rails together, bad things happen, like you can see on that picture, and the rail will buckle and the train will derail. Likewise, when you build tall buildings, skyscrapers with metal structures, you have to take into account the expansion of the metal, which is more pronounced than the expansion of other materials. You may think, well, this doesn't affect me. It does affect you. Next time that you're at your dentist, remember my little lecture and think about this. If your dentist were to fill a cavity in one of your teeth and just put an ordinary metal in it, the next time you would drink a cup of coffee or tea, you would have a big problem because the metal would expand. And since the metal expands more than the material of a tooth, your tooth would crack into two. So the dentist actually has to use a material that has an expansion that matches the expansion of your tooth. Now, you may wonder, why is it that materials, and all hard materials, I'm not talking about soft materials like skin or dough or anything. No, I'm talking about hard materials like metal or ice or stone or wood. They all expand. The reason that they expand is that atoms in a solid hold each other firmly in place. And I'm showing 9 atoms here on the screen in front of you. And as the material gets hotter, the atoms get further away from each other. So this is cold, and this is hot. Cold and hot. That's all you need to know for this little lecture. And you have to, I forgot to tell you, I'm going to give you a little test after this lecture in order to see how effective my lecture was. So you better pay attention, right? So this is cold and this is hot. And it's not just the 9 atoms that we're showing here. It's all the millions or billions of atoms that make up a solid. So cold and hot. You may wonder, why is it that the atoms get further away from each other when it gets hotter? Well, look at my video for a moment. The reason is that atoms don't sit still, they vibrate. And the amplitude of that vibration is related to what we call temperature. So if the amplitude is low, the metal is cold. If the amplitude is high, the temperature is hot. So cold like this, hot like that. Now imagine you're an atom. You wouldn't just sit like this. You shake back and forth. And as it gets hotter, you shake more and you push the atoms around you away because you need more space. That's a rather simple model of what happens in reality, but it's a pretty accurate reflection of what happens at the atomic scale. So, cold and hot. Does anybody have any question? If you have a question about what I've just presented to you, please put it in the chat. I'll pause just a minute. And think about this. I'm not going to simply ask you, make the screen black and ask you when atoms get cold, when materials get hotter, the atoms get further away from each other, closer together, or the same. That would be simply me transferring information to you and you transferring that same information back to me. I'm going to ask you if you can take this image of atoms going further away from each other and apply that to a new context. So you better ask me questions. Look, Jose Vicuña is saying all clear. I love that. I love it when my lectures are clear. Carmela is asking me an interesting question. Why does the one in the middle not move? You see, it's not moving. I'm going to give you an answer, and you're not going to I like Adrian's suggestion there. I'm going to give Carmela an answer to Carmela's question, which you might not like, Carmela, but it is the truth. The reason the one in the middle is not moving is because to prepare this slide, I made 2 drawings in Adobe Illustrator, which is the program I use to make my drawings. I made this drawing of the atoms close together, and then I make the other drawing, the second one here was the atoms further away, and then I put the 2 on top of each other with the central atom of the top layer on top of the central atom of the bottom layer. That's why the central atom is not moving. Now, you may be laughing about that, but it's actually true. It was a choice I made when I put those 2 layers on top of each other. I could equally well have taken this black atom and put it on top of that gray atom. In that case, this atom would not have remained still. This one would not have moved. And this one would have moved away and towards the left. And that one would have moved, instead of moving up, would have moved towards the right. I said to the bottom and the left, I meant to the bottom and the right here, of course. But here's the interesting point, and this is why Carmela's question is actually such a great question. The end result is the same. All the atoms are further away from each other. And remember, in a real metal, there are not 9 atoms, there are not 9 million atoms, there are not 9 billion atoms, there are not 9 billion atoms. No, there are billions of billions of billions of atoms. So the actual fact which the exact position of one atom is and which one atom does not move doesn't matter. The key point is all of them move away from each other. There is no central atom. Okay, well, since Jose said that it all was clear, I am going to assume that you are ready for my test. So thank you, Carmela. I'm going to hide my chat right now because I cannot read the chat and talk at the same time. So in order to take the test, and remember, it's not just the 9 atoms, it's all 9 millions of them. I would like you to pull up a browser. So go to your browser on your laptop or your tablet or your smartphone, and then go to this URL there, bit.ly/UAM test, and then enter some info. It doesn't matter whether it's accurate or not, just type in anything, but you have to fill out those 3 fields. And then join the session ID that is listed there. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to join. I see already I have a few people joined. That's great. Once I have a quorum of people who have joined, I will go ahead. And if you have a question about getting on, let me know. I only have 3 people join. I need more people. 5, good. So follow the instructions on the screen. Enter the information is requested, and then join session ID 407-96710. 407-96710. Good. I see a lot of people are getting on right now. Fantastic. Okay. So here is the question I want you to answer. And the information is at the bottom in case you haven't gotten on yet. You can follow the instructions at the bottom. Consider a rectangular metal plate. It's illustrated there in the top corner. But the plate has a circular hole in it. Now imagine that we uniformly heat this plate so that the metal starts to expand. What happens to the diameter of the hole? Will the diameter of the hole increase? Will it stay the same? Or will it decrease? So take a moment to think about that. And then please enter your choice on that platform. Okay, sorry, I haven't delivered the question yet. Here, I'm going to do that now. Oops, this is the wrong one. Maybe I did enter the question. Let's see. Okay, let me deliver it. So now you can answer the question online. And if you've already answered, so the same question that you see on my slide should be in your browser window. And please select one of the 3 choices. Don't answer it in the chat. The ID should still be at the bottom of the, for some reason I see no answers. Maybe I should just refresh my browser. Let's see. Oh yes, people have answered. Fantastic, good. Okay, so if you've already answered, then ask yourself, what is exactly the reason? How would I explain my reasoning to somebody else? If you haven't answered yet, I urge you to make up your mind. I'm going to give you only a few more seconds to answer, because what we're going to do, first of all, I see that, you know, only some of you got it right, and many, many, many of you got this answer incorrect. So what I'm going to do, which makes one thing very clear, you may have thought that my lecture was very clear about expansion, but it's still not possible for you to answer a simple question about expansion correctly. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you to breakout rooms, and you'll be with about 4 to 5 people in breakout rooms. I would like you to check with each other to see what answer you gave. And then if you have 2 people with opposing answers, to tell what the reasons are for giving that answer. So there you go. I'm going to send you into the breakout rooms. I'll leave you there about 3 minutes. And then I want you to re-answer the question. So there we go. So please join the breakout room, and I'll call you back after about 3 minutes. So I was in several rooms. I was in one room where everybody had the same answer. That was quite unusual. And in some other rooms where people were all fired up and actively engaged in thinking about the whole. Now, I'm sure that by now, most of you have forgotten. I'm not here to talk about thermal expansion. The answer to this question really doesn't even matter. What I wanted to show is that if you teach by questioning rather than by telling, it's much more engaging to the mind than if you're just listening to somebody. In fact, it's just absolutely amazing how easy it is to reawaken the curiosity of the human mind. I mean, anybody who's looked at small children, like, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they don't stop asking why. We are all born learners. We're all born scientists. We're wired to want to explain the world around us, which is why when we're small, we don't stop asking our parents, our teachers, why. We don't accept things on authority. It's a sad fact that education beats this out of us, in a sense that, and out of our students, right? By the time we get our students in the classroom, it's no longer about the why, it's about give me the answer so I can pass the test. Now, the great thing is I've just demonstrated to you how easy, and in a classroom, this would work even better, because you can have students seek out the neighbors around them who have a different answer, which is a little bit harder online, although it's possible, but I didn't have time to set that up. I've shown how easy it is to reawaken that innate curiosity of the human mind. Now, before I tell you the answer to this question, because I'm sure you're dying to know what the answer is, let's analyze what happened here. I asked you a question, you thought about the question, and then I had you make a commitment by voting. In the classroom, initially what I did is I had students put their hands on their chest, showing it with fingers, no technology needed whatsoever. Then we developed this platform, which also permits students who have different answers to find each other more easily. So you made a commitment, and then after you made the commitment, I put you in a breakout room. In the classroom, I would just have told you, turn to the person next to you, and you had to externalize your answer. You had to say, I chose, what did you choose? And then in the discussion, and I found that by visiting a couple of the breakout rooms, it was no longer about the answer, it was a reason that lead to the answer. How do you get to the answer that you gave? But most importantly, you became emotionally invested in the learning process. If I were not to tell you what I think the right answer is, you'd come running after me and ask me in the chat, hey, what's the answer to this question? Now, before I can tell you the answer, I want you to vote a second time to indicate what you now believe to be the right answer. So please go back to your browser and indicate what you now believe to be the right answer. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that. So go back to the browser. You should still be logged in. The only thing you have to do is select the answer again. Okay, I have 19 responses in. I need some more. So, and I still have 155 people online. Okay, so, I'd hope that you would do a little bit better. And the first response to my lecture was all clear. Remember, you saw it in the chat, all clear. And if I had not insisted on you asking me a question, I would have believed that my lecture was clear. You would have believed that my lecture was clear. But if I look at the responses in front of me, I'll actually show them to you in the browser. I'm going to stop delivery and I'm going to show it to them. revealing what the right answer is. Well, no, let's first go through this with the right answer. What is the right answer? The right answer is number 1. It increases. And as you can see in the platform, I'm going to show you the answers. It improved a little bit after the discussion, but only 30%, 3 in every 10 participants got the right answer the initial time. Now you may wonder, why is that? And I don't want you to stay awake. And again, my talk here really is about how do you best get students ready for class and in class, and not about thermal expansion. But I don't want you to be in bed tonight at midnight or 2 a.m. wide awake, still thinking about this hole. So imagine this, imagine it in the refrigerator. I'm going to try to explain this in some terms that I heard when I was in a breakout room. Imagine you have a jar of jam in the refrigerator. It's a glass jar with a metal lid. You take it out because you want to put some jam on your toast, and you hold the jar and the lid and you can't open it. What do? You put the lid under hot water. The lid is a ring and a plate, and the ring gets bigger as it expands under hot water, and you can open it. You all knew that. Well, maybe you say, well, you didn't ask about a jar. You asked about a metal plate with a hole in it, not about a ring. Okay, imagine we have a hole like this, like it's a piece of paper, but sorry, a plate without a hole in it. And I'm using this piece of paper to represent the metal. Now we take a pen and we draw a circle on this piece of paper, on this metal plate. So we have a metal plate with a circle on it, not a circular hole. Now we put this plate in the oven and we turn up the temperature and the plate expands. What happens to the diameter of the circle? It gets bigger. Everything gets bigger. The plate gets bigger, so the circle will get bigger too. You say that's unfair. If there was a hole, then the metal would expand into the hole. Let me show you what's wrong with that line of reasoning. Imagine that we all go outside together in a time that you don't have to social distance anymore, and we hold hands and we form a large circle, and each of us is an atom at the edge of the hole. I show a drawing for each dot represents one of us, and each dot is also one atom. Now imagine that I count to 3, 1, 2, 3, and at the count of 3, we each step in towards the center. Can you imagine that? So we hold hands and we each step in towards the center of the circle. What just happened to the distance between us? It got smaller. And it can't get smaller because it gets hotter. We're all shaking more. We need more space. So what's a way to make more space for us? Well, one is to remove a few atoms, but atoms don't disappear like that. Or the other is to make the hole larger. They have to make the hole has to get larger in order to make more space for the atoms to vibrate as it gets hotter. You won't forget that. So I want to point out 2 things before I wrap up this talk here. One is my clear lecture wasn't very good at inducing any learning. It was good at transferring information, but it was not good at transferring learning. And the discussion, even though it was limited by the fact that only 3 out of 10 people had the right answer, it did improve the performance somewhat. It permitted some people, only a few percent, unfortunately, because there were so few people to start out, that got the aha moment. So that actually suggests something interesting. The reason that the lecture didn't work that well was that my lecture was really focused on information transfer, and education is much more than information transfer. I like to see education as a 2-step process. 1, information transfer. It's important, but it's not sufficient. The second part is sense making, having the aha moments. Oh, now I get it. Now ask yourself, where in the standard approach to teaching, where do these two steps take place? The information transfer takes place in class, usually in the form of a lecture. The out of the sense making, the aha moments, typically takes place out of class. And if you ask yourself which of these two steps is the hardest, I think we all agree it's the second step. It's the sense-making part that's the difficult. The information transfers. We live in an information age. There's so many different ways to do the information transfer. So after discovering what we just went through and noticing that students teaching each other was so much more effective, why? Because imagine you have two students, student A and student B next to each other, Jose and Maria, let's say. Jose does not have the right answer because he doesn't understand it. Maria has the right answer because she does understand it. On average, Maria is more likely to convince Jose than Jose is able to convince Maria, because she has only recently learned it. She still knows the difficulties that the beginning learner has. Whereas Professor Mazur in front of the class learned it such a long time ago. To him, it's so clear that he cannot even understand why Jose doesn't get it. That's why this method of having students discuss material with each other in class works so extremely well. So when I discovered that, I decided to essentially flip this process around, to have the information transfer outside of the class and to have the sense making in class in the form of what I call peer instruction, instrucción entre pares. And essentially, I teach through questioning. I have students think about the question, just I had you think about the question briefly. I poll them either by having hands on the chest indicating all at the same time what the answer is, or through one of the platform. Then I tell them to find somebody who has a different answer and try to convince that person. I poll them again, and then I have an explanation which can either come from one of the students or from myself, and that cycle essentially repeats until time is up. And the aha moments actually take place during this discussion. You will actually see students experience that aha moment in front of you. They'll go, oh, yes. And once you have that aha moment, you know it forever. You know it for life. That's the beauty of it. So I don't have time to go into any details because I have a little bit more to tell you, but peer instruction, if you go to Google Scholar right now and you type in peer instruction and veterinary medicine or English or Spanish or art history or physics or chemistry, you'll find people who have done research showing significantly higher learning gains. In my own case, I saw that with lecturing, I had about a 25% normalized gain from beginning of semester to the end of the semester. After I went to peer instruction, I tripled that gain, and that's not unusual. In addition, a study done at Carnegie Mellon shows that if you have this active form of learning, you have much better retention, because once you have this aha moment, as I said a moment ago, it sticks. You remember it not just to pass the exam, you remember it for life. So in the last few minutes, I want to briefly tell you about the other part, the information transfer. Since we've eliminated the lecture, that you have to make time for these questions. You can try to do both in class, but then you won't have enough time for the information transfer at all. So the question is, how can you effectively transfer information outside of the classroom? Since I had already recorded the video of all of my lectures, I thought, maybe I'll just have students watch the video. But there's a problem with video. The first thing is that the transfer pace is set by the video, which is to say the learner has to essentially process the information at the pace that is set by the instructor. And in fact, which means there's not really time to think, right? Because imagine that you're listening to a lecture and there's something that makes you think, and you want to think, your mind wanders, you can no longer process the incoming information. With video, you could pause it, but the data that I've seen from edX and a couple of other platforms shows that most students accelerate the video. They watch it at 1.5 or 2 or 2.5. The other thing is the viewer is passive. And the data from edX also show that over time, the students watch less and less because they discovered that they can answer the multiple choice questions by simply Googling them online without even watching the video. And most of all, it's an isolated individual experience, the video and the students. So essentially, by asking students to watch video, we're moving this out of the classroom, and we're not really accomplishing the information transfer that we want to accomplish. So that's when I thought we should really have students go back to reading. Reading is such an important skill. It's a skill on which we depend after we graduate in our professional lives. And therefore, we should really train the students to learn by reading. It has a huge advantage because when you read material, you are in control of the transfer pace. If your mind starts wandering, you automatically stop reading. And you read as fast or as slow as you want, not as the instructor lectures. And also research has shown that the brain is much more active when reading than when listening. But there's a problem with reading too, namely it's an isolated individual experience and there's no real accountability. How do I know if I tell my students read chapter 25, that they indeed do read chapter 25 before they come to the classroom? What is it that we want? We really want every student prepared for every classroom so that they can be taught by questioning in the classroom. And ideally, without having to grade quizzes or do any extra work. It is only recently, a few years ago, that I finally realized what the solution was. I'd worked hard on making the classroom a more social interactions through peer instruction. The key was to make the reading and the out-of-class component also a social interaction. And without knowing, I prepared myself actually for the pandemic that happened this year. I'll come back to that in just a second. So essentially, what is it that we want? We want every student prepared for every class without doing extra work. That prompted me to design a platform called Perusal, which is entirely free. You can use it in your class next semester if you want. At its heart, Perusal is a social learning platform. Students can log in through their social network, Facebook, Twitter, Google. And once you're on, it looks like an e-reader with one twist. The e-reader shows you who else is online. So in a big class, you'll actually see many avatars of students who are online. And if while you're reading, there's something that you don't understand, you can highlight the text, and the act of highlighting the text opens a chat window. And after you type in some text, the highlight will stick. So after a while, the text will be marked up. And if you click on one of these markups, it opens a chat window. Let me magnify this a little bit for you. Here, a student whose avatar is shown here. And in the actual program, if I would click on it, I would see the name of the student. On October 20th at midnight, she said, I don't understand how this combination of factors tells you anything about blah, 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 blah. A little later, about half an hour later, another student with the initials SP write, I think you may be able to think about the direction separately, blah, 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 blah. 2 days later, a third student on October 22nd, as you can see, says, this is a great question. To further elaborate on this, we can blah, 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 blah. So in a sense, you see some sort of asynchronous peer instruction going on online. There's much more, but I don't have time to show you. There are things to vote up good questions so they bubble up to the top. There are features to chat individually without chatting about something specific in the text. There are ways of upvoting good answers so that good explanations bubble up. There are ways to use email to interact with the chat. Unfortunately, I cannot really show you all of these features. But what I do want to discuss briefly is how do you get students to participate in this process? And essentially, the platform uses a combination of two types of motivators. One, intrinsic, I want to participate, and the other, extrinsic. Let's start with the extrinsic one. There's a rubric-based assessment of the students' interaction with the text. Essentially, the students must demonstrate thoughtful reading and interpretation of the text. What does that mean? It means that if you just highlight something and say, I don't understand this, it's not enough, because you can do that without reading or without thinking. You could just go in and highlight and say, I don't understand this. If you highlight something and you say, I don't understand this because on page 256, it says blah, 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 at least we know it's connected to something else in the text. If you highlight something, you say, I don't understand this because on page 256, it says blah, 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 blah. And I thought that, and you reveal your thinking, you start to get full credit. We want a certain minimum quantity of annotations that are thoughtful. We want them to be on time before class, and we want them to be distributed through the text. So if it's a 5-page assignment, we want students not only to annotate the first page, but also the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth page. With that very simple rubric in my class, which has 75 students, I get over 20,000 annotations in one semester. We use a machine learning algorithm, a specialized machine learning algorithm that actually assesses intellectual content. I don't have enough time to really go into the details, but you can find on the Perusal website some papers that point out the way this works and some research that has been done on it. It actually does better than an individual human does. So in other words, if you train it with a specific person's grading, it will follow that training better than another human, because some of this interpretation is, of course, rather subjective. It's not completely objective, the intellectual content. Immediately afterward, there's a grade book which interfaces with the learning management system, so you can exactly see what each student has done and get detail on how thoughtful the annotations were, how many were on time, and so on. I cannot really give you too much detail in the little few minutes that I have left. I want to show you one more feature because it gets even better. You see, in a sense, the annotations are a window in. And I was just clicking on their annotations and reading their feedback. I went, oh, wow, that's how they're thinking. And I realized that my students often attach different meanings to words than I did because they didn't have the expert vocabulary that I had. And I think I was able to actually improve my writing significantly by looking at it. Also, it pointed out to me what to address in the classroom. I'd go, wow, this would be the perfect question to ask in class. It connects, in a sense, the pre-class reading and the in-class activity. So we developed another algorithm in Perusal that we call the confusion report. And for this chapter 24 that the students had to read, it shows the 3 main topics of confusion: right-hand rule, direction of the magnetic field, Earth's magnetic field. So I can walk into the classroom and I said, thank you for your annotations. I looked at your annotations, and it looks like there are 3 topics of confusion: the right-hand rule, the direction of the magnetic field, the Earth's magnetic field. One of you asked the following question: why is it that the magnetic field points away, blah, blah, blah? I actually quote the question from an actual student, and they'll go, wow, he read all our questions. Well, I read only 9 of them because it shows 3 exemplar questions for each topics of confusion. But it certainly gives the impression that I am actually taking their annotations seriously. And rather than asking questions on subject that I think they find difficult, I can actually zoom in on what is difficult for them. So what are the motivating factors? Well, one, it's a social interaction online. It's fun to be interacting with each other online for the students. Some spend a significant amount of time on there rather than on Facebook. Secondly, there's a tie-in to an in-class activity. Rather than, they find out that if they express their misunderstanding, there's a good chance that I will actually address it in the classroom. And lastly, there's the assessment, which is fully automated. So let me show you some class test results. This shows you the number of chapters that the students missed annotating before coming for class in my course, where they had to reach 17 chapters. So this plot really goes on towards the right, but you don't see it because there are no data, it's all zero. And these are 3 different semesters as we were improving the algorithm. Notice that in the last year that we did the testing, which was a couple of years ago, 70% of the students missed 0 chapter. Every single of the 70 chapters, they annotated thoughtfully. And then 18% missed 1 chapter, maybe, I don't know, something like 8% missed 2 chapters, a few percent 3 chapters, and a very few, maybe 2%, 4 chapters. Nobody missed 5 or 6. So if you put the first 3 bins together, that's close to 95%. Which means 95% reads either all or a few of them miss 1 or 2. I don't know about you, but I miss deadlines sometimes, and students sometimes have an exam in another class or they get sick or whatever. I think this is as close as possible as we can get to every student prepared for every class. And frankly, since developing Perusal, I have not looked back. I have completely stopped lecturing, which is why I'm so happy that I can lecture to you right now here, because I actually love lecturing. Now, you can use it. The software is free, and you can just upload a PDF file, articles, book manuscript, whatever you want. If you want to use a commercial textbook, we have arrangements with most publishers to make the book available either through the university library or through individual student purchases of commercial books as well, and often at a price that's much better than that of the library price. But again, you can start using it right away with PDF files or web articles or anything else. Again, more details, unfortunately, on online, because I don't have time to it. So in conclusion, I've now showed to you how I do the out-of-class information transfer using Perusal, and I'll use the in-class sense-making peer instruction. And what we have sort of proved together here right now today is that this works online. Perusal works online because it is online, but the peer instruction can actually be done online on Zoom with breakout rooms. Now, it's a little bit more clumsy than doing it in the classroom, but it works. I went into several different breakout rooms and people were talking about the hole in the plate. So I hope in conclusion that I've shown to you that education is not just about information transfer. It's not about getting students to do what we do, solve the type of problems that we do. We want our students to solve the problems that we don't know how to solve. I want my students to stand on my shoulders and solve the problems that I cannot solve. And in order to do so, what we really need to do is have this active engagement, this social interaction, both out of class as well as in class. And in a sense, I've shown you the 2 tools that permit you to do this, not only in a real life setting in the classroom, but also online. Thank you very much.
We thank you all, Professor Mazur, because you gave us such inspiring ideas in teaching. And I think we are going to implement that in our universities, and especially in the CIVIS network. And thank you to Autónoma de Madrid for offering us such a wonderful moment, with you. I think now it's time to Rector Garrese to finish this wonderful lecture. Thank you again, Eric.
Well, thank you. It was really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Rafael?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sorin. Thank you very much, Professor Mazur. Has been, as some people told you, a quite inspiring session. I think it's very timely also because I firmly believe that we are in a turning point now in higher education, and not specifically for pandemic, but because we are in the 2020, so we are in the 21st century, and I think the higher education has a lot of challenges in front of us, and this session has been very inspiring, fantastic, you know, in all the terms, because we think a little bit about many topics that, you know, we in the day-to-day have difficult, it's very difficult to find the right time to answer and to think about this question. So as Sorin said, we will try to think and try to, with this inspiration, try to implement some changes in our education, in this sense-making education, I would say, that we have learned today. So thank you very much also to the Minister, Regional Minister of Education for his continued support to Madrid universities, also to Raquel Galindo, our director of the IAP program, and Francisco Iborra for his continued support too. And all of you for attending this wonderful session. Have a nice day, all of you. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Bye-bye and be well.